the museum. I would like to thank everybody for coming and showing up and showing so much enthusiasm for this show. I also would like to remind you all that we do not get any donations from the government, that we are non-appropriate funds, and any donation that you all can give would be greatly appreciated in order to bring you these kind of shows again. They are not cheap, we do have to pay for them, but we appreciate that you all like it and that you are so enthusiastic about it. A couple more minutes and the stage will be all hers. There's only one Unsinkable in this world, and that is me. And of course, it's because of what happened on that great ship, the Titanic, which came back into your lives, oh, I think about 18 years ago. How was that film? Did you enjoy it?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes. Well, I tell you, I just wish, however, that I'd been played by someone a little, oh, I don't know, a little less pudgy and a little more glamorous. Oh, but when I look at that poster there and I see those two young people, I think, Rose, Rose with no clothes. And Jack, Jack, there is just something that you lack. I don't know about you, but I think the Clark Gables of this world and the Jimmy Stewarts are a little more exciting. Or maybe you're into the era of George Clooney. I don't know. But that young man is a leading man. Well, oh well, that's Hollywood for you. But the good news is, the movie came out and it cost $20 million. Can you imagine? But the actual ship of the Titanic only cost $7 million. I think I'd rather have the ship than the movie. Well, I tell you, when I think of the very early days of my life growing up in Hannibal, Missouri, by golly, you know, that was the hometown not only of the Unsinkable herself, but also of Samuel Clemens or Mr. Mark Twain himself, right along that beautiful Mississippi River it is. And I'll tell you, there's nothing like that at Mississippi River except for the great Rocky Mountains. And I see you've got some right out here in Belen, New Mexico, a piece of the Rocky Mountains too. I love the Rockies. And I only went back to Hannibal to visit when I finally left. But I'll tell you what, growing up there as a young girl, my mother and my father, John and Johanna Tobin, I was Margaret Tobin, and they called me Maggie during my lifetime. I always wanted to be called Molly. So I hope today you start calling me Molly because I really like that name. That kind of fits me somehow. At any rate, growing up there in Hannibal, Missouri, we lived in a little 3-room house. It was really more of a shack than a house. But it's restored today, and it looks pretty darn good, I must say, for a shack. My daddy was a worker in the gas works there in Hannibal, and my mother raised 6 children in that little place, if you can imagine that. And I was a rambunctious tomboy all the way, that's what I was. And one day I remember there was a huge cyclone that came up the Mississippi River. And that cyclone, there I was out in the middle of the river in a little rowboat all by myself, about 5 years old. And the wind started tossing that boat to and fro and to and fro. And all of a sudden I completely capsized right there in the Mississippi River. And who should be on the banks of the side of that river that day? Who should rescue me that day? Well, I'll tell you what, it was Mr. Mark Twain himself. He got all of his clothes off and other related accoutrements and jumped into the river, and he started to swim towards where I was bobbing up and down in the water. And he grabbed me and he pulled me all the way to the shore, he did, and he saved my life. And he said, one day, little girl, you're going to have to pay someone back for rescuing your life today. And you know, that did happen. That did happen, but many, many years later, that's for sure. Well, by golly, here we are in this historic Harvey house, beautiful museum that it is. You must be very proud of it. Very proud of it indeed. I loved my little town, but you know, growing up there, I found that I was just too cooped up. I didn't have enough to do. I did go to school, however, until I was about 13 years of age. A lot of people think I couldn't read or write, but I could. I could. Not real well, but I could. How many times have I taken the train across this country from coast to coast just to travel, just to see things? Oh, I love this country. Don't you love this country? Yes. Oh, my word, I love this country. And there it goes, the B, N, S, and F. Sounds kind of nasty to me. Well, anyway, there it goes. And no one's going to get on here, I see. You're not going to get on the train today? You're going to stay with me, are you? Well, all right. Well, I felt a little limited, you know, and there were a lot of naysayers in my town, especially when you're a Catholic girl, and you're poor as a church mouse, and you're Irish to boot. That was me, Irish, Catholic, and poor. And everyone said, well, you're not going to amount to much. You won't do very much in your lifetime. And I said, oh, yes, I will. Don't you see that I'm down when I'm up? I'm going to tell you what, I'm up there. I'm up there in my mind. I have a vision that I'm up there, talking with the people that are going to accomplish something in life. I am no bottom to no pile, no siree. I am going to be a somebody. And don't you ever tell me that I have to holler, Uncle, no siree. I already believe I'm someone, and I know I'm heading there. I'm going to head there right now today, and this is a song that I sang at that time from the one and only musical, All Around Itself. I'm going to learn to read and write. I'm going to see what there is to see. So if you go from nowhere on the road to somewhere, and you meet anyone, you'll know it's free. I'm going to move from place to place to find a house with an old still. And if the house is red and has a big brass bell, I'm there to show that you know, to show you know, you know. Thank you. I'm going to move there. I'm going to see you all the day. So that you breathe out so I'm going to be someone. Yes, I will. I will. I will. I'm going to head to the Colorado Rockies. Well, I didn't head to the Colorado Rockies just yet, but I almost stopped there overnight when one day I waited on Mr. Mark Twain himself at the Park Hotel there in Harvey, Missouri. Well, Mr. Mark Twain came back to visit as he was wont to do. I waited on him, and he got to talking to me, and I got to talking with him, and we were like bosom buddies, you know. And he said, you know, young girl, with your kind of spunk, you need to be heading west, maybe out in Colorado. That's where you need to go, because they have silver strikes out there and gold strikes, and things are happening out west, much more than they are back here in Hannibal, Missouri. So I said to him, well, I'm going to work on that. And I did. When I was 17 years old, almost 18, I went with my brother Daniel. And my brother Daniel and I, we packed our little suitcase. It was a little cardboard suitcase. And we filled it full of sandwiches for 2 days, 3 days on the train. Mostly peanut butter and jelly. That's my favorite. I don't know about you. And we headed west on the train. And but I used to tell people that the first time I went to Colorado, I came out in a stagecoach, and out there in the middle of the prairie, all of a sudden, we were held up by Jesse James himself. Jesse James! Yes, sir, he held us up, and when they had us get out and walk around and see what we had to offer, I said, I will give you myself and everything that I own. I'm going to protect these people. That's what I'm here for. Well, that sounds like a really good story, don't it? I kind of made that up. People said I made up a lot of stories in my lifetime. It was kind of a fabricality that I had a gist for, you know. So, but we came out on the train, not on a stagecoach, but I like the Jesse James thing much more. But then we got to the Mile High City of Denver itself, it was. And when we arrived there, I thought, oh boy, would I love to live there someday. Woo-hoo! I want to live in Denver and be somebody here. But we was heading up to Leadville, Colorado, the highest city in the United States. Winter's so cold, they'll curl your toes up there. By golly, we were heading to Leadville, and when we finally got there, we were going to stay for a couple of weeks at one of my half-sister's homes. Her name was VanAnn and her husband. They were mining up there. And so Daniel and I stayed there, and I got a job at the Daniels and Fisher Emporium, where I worked on quilts and pillows and pretty things like that, and curtains, and I had them all. And then at night, they said that I used to go over to the old Saddleback Cafe and sing a song or two for the miners and recite some poetry. I was kind of good at that sort of thing, and they said they just loved me. Loved me. How long is this damn train going to last? Well, bye-bye. And so I'd recite poetry and I'd sing at night, you know, for the miners and entertain. I'd do that all of my life. I don't know, I guess I should have been an actress or something. But I tell you, I loved it, and then I'd work during the day at the Daniels and Fisher Emporium. And if you've ever lived in Denver, and you remember that big, tall tower there, there's an Italian tower there in town, and that was called the Daniels and Fisher Department Store. Mm-hmm. Yes, they were, and then years later, it became, ladies and gentlemen, especially ladies, it became Macy's. So, if you like to shop, I used to make goods for them our folks. Well, you know, I'm a good Catholic girl. But I also have good Catholic hopes of finding a good Catholic man. And if he's Irish, that'd be great. There was a lot of Irish people up there. But I didn't want just anyone. Not me. No sirree, Bob. I wanted a rich man. Now, ladies, how many of you have those kind of hopes out there? I want to see your hands. I like the big rocker things, you know. Well, and you always wait, ladies, for that big rock in that marriage ceremony before you let the horse in the barn. Well, by golly, there I am, going quietly about my business. And they was having I guess you call it a Catholic picnic there in town. And I went to it, and lo and behold, who should be there but this big, tall, rather good-looking man. But he was a little older than I was by about 13 years, and he sort of took an interest in me, and his name was J. Brown, otherwise known as James Joseph Brown. And Mr. Brown took an interest in me, and he said, ma'am, I'd like to take you out sometime. And I said, well, that sounds mighty fine to me. And so there I am, still staying at my sister's house. And he comes by, and he comes by the next weekend, and he had this horse and carriage out front. And I opened the door, and I looked, and I went, oh, that ain't good enough for me. And I shut the door in his face. And I told him so, too. And so the next week, he spent $100 for a brand new carriage to rent for the day and 2 matching beautiful bay horses. Then when he had me open the door, I went, well, it's a little better. You gotta keep your expectations high. And don't settle for things, and girls don't pay for the man. No, don't do that at all. Well, there we were, going up and having a lovely picnic, and now he's getting to know me just a little bit better day by day and week by week. Although I have to tell you, he was moving pretty fast. And I thought to myself, well, he's not a miner anymore. He's a shift boss, and they said he's going to be superintendent of some of the mines up there, especially the Little Johnny mine. Oh, boy, that sounded good to me. And so I said to him one day when he took me out again on a nice picnic, and this time he did it up right. He had a lemon tablecloth to put on the ground, beautiful silverware and beautiful china, a beautiful meal all packed up in the hamper. And I thought, well, he's doing better. And I said to him, Mr. Brown, what are your intentions for me? And he said something like this. I'll never say no to you, Missy. I'll never say no, but I'll make you happy. I'll make you smile. I'll make you laugh. I'll give you the world. That's what he said to me. in the Catholic Church with the highest steeple in the United States at the Annunciation Catholic Church in Leadville. Beautiful church with a hand-carved pews made by the German hand carvers there that used to live there in town. And oh my, pretty little wedding. Took me up to Twin Lakes, you know. Took me up to Twin Lakes, and oh, we had the most wonderful honeymoon up there. How many of you love your honeymoons? You got that right. It's after honeymoon. That's what you got to worry about. It's after. Well, I tell you what, he did have me move in a little shack, almost a shack, a two-room cabin, right up there by the little Johnny Mine at the little town, a little settlement that is, called Stumptown, right up 5th Street in Leadville. All right. Well, there we are up there, and I'll tell you what, we are up there at our little two-room cabin, and every night could hear the coyotes howl. It would get cold up there at night, but you know, the wonderful thing about it is I had my big brass bed. That is real. That was a real thing to me, with all these comforters on top of it, you know. And before I could turn around, boom, boom, I had 2 kids. So don't ever ask for a big brass bed and comforters. Well, you got to do something on the winter nights. And then one day he had $300,000. $300,000 of payroll. And that payroll, he said, now Maggie, I need you to hide this payroll. I don't know where you're going to put it, but you got to put someplace special. I'm going down to the Saddle Rock Cafe with my buddies, and we're going to have a little drink, and I'll be back. Well, I fell asleep that night, and you know, it was in July. But if you've been in Colorado, even in July, sometimes it can get mighty cold. And I went to bed in that famous bed, and that night he came home, and unbeknownst to me, he said, "Ma, it's a little chilly in here tonight." And so he lit the fire, and that night we had a nice, cozy little cabin. Oh my goodness, and the next morning I woke up, and I realized that he had burned up $300,000 in that pot-bellied stove. And oh my word, I said, "Oh, Mr. Brown, Mr. Brown, Mr. Brown." Oh, I wept and I wept and I carried on. I'm real good at that. I carried on. He says, "Maggie, don't cry over spilled milk." That's always what he said to me. Do not cry over spilled milk. He says, "I'll make it up. I'll make it up." He went that day to the bank, the Tabor Bank there in Leadville. Now the Tabors had made it real big, and they were known as the Silver King and Queen of Colorado. Horace Tabor and Baby Doe. And they had money coming out of their ears. And so he went to the bank, got a loan, and paid that $300,000, got it taken care of, paid the miners, everything was fine. And then finally, he says, "My darling, I think we can move down to Leadville itself." And if you've ever been in Leadville, is there anyone here who's been to Leadville? Well, God bless you. Oh, Cloud City it is. And we moved down to 7th Street. A pretty little house is still there, white with blue trim, you know. And that's where we were. And that's when I said, I'm going to improve myself in life. I want more education. I want to learn languages. I want to learn how to sing. I want to learn how to do all kinds of things. And so in that little house, I would take lessons every day, 6 hours a day, hired someone to watch the little kids. And this is the photograph that we took at that time of us living there at the 7th Street house. And there we are, my little girl, Helen, and my little boy, Larry or Lawrence. Yes, he's wearing a skirt. Don't make that, don't think that was bad back then, but today, I don't know. So there he is, there's Larry in his skirt. Actually, we called it an Irish kilt, is what we called it. And there's little Helen, and there I am. And let me tell you, we didn't have a whole hell of a lot then, but you know what? We was happy. We were happy, we were happy, we were happy. And let me tell you, when you're happy and you're doing well, you got your children and your husband's working and all those good and wonderful things. See, there we are, darling, I'm looking good. This was the happiest moment of my life. This was in the early 1890s, it was. And if you know how that era went, let me tell you, by 1893, the silver market, and that's what Leadville was known for, was all the silver mines, you see. And today there's thousands of miles of tunnels under Leadville because you see what happened in 1893? They changed the silver standard for the gold standard. Now it's going to be gold, not silver, and overnight that town shut down mines like crazy. And there we were wondering, how are we going to make money now? Because the mines are closing down. Well, all those tunnels are filled with water today. If they can pump them out, maybe they can find some more silver or gold. I don't know. But at that time, it was kind of discouraging. And there was a depression up there in Leadville, if you will. And my husband was working still at the Little Johnny Mine. Now he's a superintendent, you see. And so he decided, well, the sides of the mine are starting to cave in. He was a mining engineer by this point. That's what he was. And he figured out how to shore up the sides of this caves, or the tunnels, if you will, that go deep into the Little Johnny Mine. He shored them up with hay bales. Then they could go deeper into the mine, and guess what he found? The largest vein of gold ever found anywhere in the world. So we got to give Mr. Brown credit for that. I'll tell you what, because of that success, that mine made billions of dollars and is still producing today under the Ibex Mining Corporation name. And I'll tell you what, it was Mr. Brown himself who made that happen. Lo and behold, Mr. Brown, what a man he was. And so, of course, you understand the writing on the wall now, don't you? I'm a millionaires. I'm heading to Denver. I'm leaving Leadville behind. Oh boy. Woohoo! And I'll tell you what, when I got to Denver, I said, boy, I'm going to be in high society. And I used to dress up. Well, look at your programs. Look at those dresses I got from Paris and all over. Aren't those pretty dresses? I tell you, I spent a fortune on some of them. And some of them took, one dress alone took 3 months to make because they made the lace by hand in France. Oh, yes, they're Parisian fashions. And I went to the opera, and I went to the symphony, and I bought pretty things for my house. But on the wall, if you go into the Maggie and J.J. Brown house, here's a little picture of it here. If you go there today, you will see on the wall, as you go into the house, you'll see 2 heads of a coyote. And you wonder, what the heck was she thinking about there? Well, I always wanted to remember my humble beginnings with Mr. Brown. And so in this house of ours, there at 1340 Pennsylvania Avenue, and you can go there today, there are 2 heads of coyotes in the hallway. And then you go into the big parlor and you see a piano. Oh, it's the prettiest thing you ever saw in your life. And underneath it, there's a great big white polar bear rug. And who do you think gave me that rug? This was a little later in my life, but it was President Theodore Roosevelt himself. Oh, yes. And there's a pretty music box in there. I'll tell you, it's a very nice house. 7,000 to 10,000 feet. And upstairs is a ballroom and everything. And we had about 6 servants at that time. And someone to drive us in our carriage, and a carriage boy in the servants' quarters. And oh my goodness, we were just highfalutin. But there was one problem with this whole situation of me moving to Denver, my dream, my goal. I was not accepted totally in society. Somehow they thought I was kind of a hick from the sticks. You know, just a miner's wife. I mean, who is she? Who is she? Well, I said, I'm going to remedy that. And so I went to the Carnegie Institute. And that Carnegie Institute taught me 7 languages. I learned 5 of them fluently. And I learned to sing. And I tell you what, I just thought I was doing pretty well for myself. I remember very specifically, I remember very specifically learning some of my lessons, and I would stand out on the street line, if you will, on my little balcony looking down on the street of Pennsylvania Avenue, and I would say little exercises like this. Throckmorton is in an anomalous predicament. That was for my enunciation. Long live ubiquitous society. And of course, everybody would drive by and go, oh my gosh, it's Miss Brown again, reciting from her balcony. You know. And then they would write about me in the paper. Well, I wanted to improve myself. I remember one of my teachers, he said, now, Mrs. Brown, you need to open your mouth when you talk. And the reason why you need to do so, think of a big cork in your mouth. I said, well, all right. He says, that's what you need to think, because I want rounded tones. Now speak around that cork. You try it. I told him, I said, well, most people want me to keep my mouth shut, but all right. And so there we are. Those are my lessons. French, German, a little Russian, you name it, Italian, Spanish. I even spoke Spanish. Oh, I was having a ball, but still, the Sacred 36, led by Mrs. Crawford Hill. I'll tell you what, that Mrs. Crawford Hill used to invite all these certain 36 women. She thought they were the cream of society. She would invite them over to play whist. Now, I don't know about you, but that sounds pretty boring to me. But I never got invited to her house. Oh, I'd drive by sometimes in my carriage and look at the great parties going on there, and I thought, well, what's wrong with me that I can't be there at that party? So my husband, JJ, said, now, Maggie, come on. Let's go on a round-the-world tour, and let's see what's out there. And I gathered our two kids up, and I said, that sounds like a good idea. You know, so we went to Japan. I got a kimono there. And then when we went to Spain, I learned to play classical guitar. I really did. I took lessons. I mean, we're gone a whole year. I had plenty of time. And then in Switzerland, I learned to yodel. Oh, little ole, 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 my word, Roy Rogers, move over. And you know, the funny thing was, I got accepted by the society wherever I went. Oh, well, that's unusual, isn't it? I was known as the uncrowned queen of Parisian society. Well, I thought it was kind of wonderful. And then things started showing up in the paper about me. And I tell you, publicity is a very breath of my soul, you know. And so I was thrilled. I cut out little things about me in the paper and whatever. But I loved people. And I just was myself. And people like that. They don't like you to be all pretentious. Just be yourself. Be who you are. Be who God made you, for crying out loud. And then I realized something that Mark Twain said. He said, travel is fatal to prejudice, bigotry, and narrow-mindedness. Well, you know what? He is absolutely right. And then another little quote I remember from him, good breeding consists of concealing how much we think of others. Excuse me. Good breeding consists of concealing how much we think of ourselves and how little we think of the other person. So you just got to think of the other person. Think of the other person. That's the most important thing. And you know, I tell you, I knew everyone from the Bosphorus all the way to Moscow. So I was happy camper, but I came back to Denver and I still wasn't accepted by the Sacred 36. And by this point, my children are going to be sent off to school. I sent them to beautiful private schools in Europe, and they was having a great, big, wonderful time doing that, you know. And I sent my little boy, remember he's the one with the skirt? I sent him to military school, just to be safe. And, you know, how it goes. So anyway, that's what I did. But JJ said, well, the schools here in Denver are good enough. I said, no, they need to be educated elsewhere and learn other languages and stuff. But there in Denver, I started raising money for that big Catholic cathedral there in Denver. I almost single-handedly helped to raise money for that. And that's why that cathedral is there today. And I remember, I said, I have a wonderful idea. I am going to invite the Indians on the plains, there were still a few Plains Indians out there in the 1890s. I'm going to invite them into Denver. Come on down, I said. Come on down. Bring your teepees and your horses and come on down. And I said, you just camp out right in front of the new Capitol building with the gold dome. Just camp out there. That's fine. And then you sell your wares at our Catholic fair. That's what I told them. And I said, that's what we're going to do. You're going to make money and we'll make money too. What a good deal that was, I thought. Until I got a little call on the first telephone in Denver. And golly bee, it was the mayor. Oh, no, it wasn't. I beg your pardon. It was the governor. The governor said, now, Ms. Brown, I understand. I appreciate what you're doing for the Catholic fair. But I'll tell you what, Ms. Brown, it'd be best if you brought the Indians, took them somewhere else. I said, well, send them to me. I'm not prejudiced. You just send them on down to me. And so they camped out on my front lawn, their teepees. I let them use my stable with their horses and everything. They came in and helped themselves to food and anything else that they wanted at my house. My house also had one of the first bathrooms in town, so that was a real new thing for those Indians. I'm going to tell you that. They hardly knew what to do for themselves, you know. But they got treated royally. And of course, everybody drove by Miss Brown's house going, That's Mrs. Brown again. What is she doing this time? Oh, my goodness. Bringing the Indians in off of the plains. Well, I made money for the cathedral, by golly, and then I made money for the St. Joseph's Hospital. I was always doing that because I think charity is something wonderful that you can do in life. It comes back to you. It comes back to you. You're nodding your head, my dear, and you know what I'm talking about. It comes back to you. If you're down and you feel depressed, cheer somebody else up. Put a smile on your face. For crying out loud, if that's all you've got to give a smile. You know, but give of yourself. And then I thought, well, surely they'll invite me now, the Sacred 36, but they didn't. And after that Indian thing that happened at my house, Mr. J.J. Brown said, well, Miss Brown, I don't know. What am I going to do with you? What am I going to do with you? And he thought long and long about it. He says, Ms. Brown, I think I should just stick to my mining and you stick to your socializing. So we kind of parted ways a little bit in our social lives, but we stayed married all of our life. All of our life. I still have the rock on the finger, girls, if you notice. So all of our lives, we were together, but not together, if you will, because I wanted to be out in the world. I didn't want to be just up in Leadville. Do you know JJ even came down to New Mexico because he had gold mines down here? Yes, he did. He had gold mines in Arizona. Oh, my goodness, he had mining interests everywhere. And a few other interests, too, I found out about, but whatever. But I said, I'm too busy. I'm going to go to Newport, Rhode Island. Newport, Rhode Island. The Barrens of Newport. Well, I wasn't a baron, but I had a beautiful cottage there for nigh on almost 20 years. And it was at that time that I took in my brother's 3 children and helped to raise them because he died and his wife died, my brother Daniel. Yes, indeed, the one that got me to Leadville to begin with. He had 3 beautiful girls. I raised them just like my own, put them in schools. I took care of the whole Tobin family. My parents were living in my house, for goodness sake. My mom still smoking a cob pipe. You know those Irish women, oh my goodness. Anyway, so there they were, but they lived there in that house. But we did get a country house, and all the kids loved to go out there. It was called Africa. I thought that sounded really, really impressive. Africa, come to my country home at Africa. Well, they made fun of that in the paper too, because I wrote something about Africa and the name where it came from, and I said it was the hand made of the Lord. I didn't know how to spell made, M-A, so I made hand made, M-A-D-E, of the Lord. Oh well. Anyway. It was a beautiful place, big barns and beautiful horses and chickens everywhere, and everybody loved to come to Africa. I had theatricals out there. my husband was going to raise some chickens out there at one point. That house is still there, and nobody talks about it, but it's right out there on Wadsworth. Yes indeed, it's still there in Denver. You can go see it, and that's the house with the golden stairwell. Very beautiful, and the Sisters of Loretta were just around the corner from where I lived. You could go hunting, you could go fishing out there, riding. It was wonderful. Well, one day some of the Sisters of Loretta came over to the house, and I wasn't there. My mother was there, and they said to her, "Oh, Mrs. Brown," you know, in their little habits. Mrs. Tobin, what is Mrs. Brown up to these days? And she said, "Oh, she's raising hell like usual." She said that to the Catholic nuns. I don't know. Mama was something else. But that was a beautiful place to go. But you know, Newport, Rhode Island, that is really the place to go in New York City. And I loved every darn moment of it. And when I was in Europe, there was someone who said to me, "Mrs. Brown, you are just wonderful. How is it that you can create these wonderful dishes?" Because I'd gone to, school to create cuisine dishes, special dishes. "How can you do that? And you can also speak our languages. What is it about you?" And I said, "Oh, that is nothing at all. Nothing at all. Don't you even think about it." I said, "It's easy for me." When a Frenchman speaks my language, I'm a slob not to try to speak his. Lots of German folks talk United States. Why should I know? Die Gates. You look was bits of Russian in a very neighborly style. And if you make a mistake, well, what's the difference? A smile is a smile is a smile. How about Italian? Yes, sirree. I'm there with the Buonasera. Buonasera. And when the Japanese bows and murmurs low, we holler back, "Ohio!" You look us, Prince of Russian in a very neighborly style. And if you make a mistake, well, what's the difference? Agree, disagree, disagree. How about Hindustani? Ooh, that's easy. Namaskar, namaskar, I will say. And how about Persian? Oh, salam, salam, that's so easy. And of course, Greek, kalimera, kalimera greets the Greek. And it's a sunlight rush right in. And if you make a mistake, well, what's the difference? Agree is agree is agree. Any old day, agree is agree. So I spoke the languages and I was having them all around the world. But of course, the sacred 36 still was ignoring me. And now I'm raising my 2 children and my brother's 3 children, and I have a thing for kids. You know, kids and I get along really well. Kids and I get on real well. You look like a nice little boy. Just talk to kids like you would yourself. Pretend like, what was I like when I was a kid? I wanted someone to acknowledge me, someone to look at me, someone to give me a little hint about life or to encourage me a little bit. That's what everybody needs in this life, is encouragement, don't you think? Well, that's what I thought anyway. And so I would encourage these kids. I said, you can do anything in the world that you want to achieve. You can do it all. You can do it all.
Yes, we can.
Yes, you can. Absolutely. You just have to believe it. And I believe, because I'm a believer in someone bigger than myself, I believe that it's God who can give you the power to become anything or anyone you want to be, and He can give you the power to do it. And so that was what kept me going in life. And you know, one of my tours, one of my most favorite tours of all, until the very end, of course, was going all the way to Europe to see my beautiful daughter, who was at a convent school. She was at a convent school there in Paris. She was growing up into this beautiful young lady. Belen was a gorgeous girl. And I said, Helen, you join your mama. We're going to start looking for things to create the Denver Art Museum. There was no art museum till I came along. I said, we're going to get statues and all kinds of pretty things, and we're going to bring them to Denver. And so there we are. We're going to go all the way from Paris to Italy, and of course we'll go to Austria, and all along the way I started buying these beautiful treasures, beautiful statues. Of course, I knew the naked ones, I'd have to put clothes on them in the front yard because, you know, the people in Denver wouldn't take kindly to that. But I was so excited, and then I said, let's go to Egypt. And I have a picture up here of me on a camel in Egypt, and my hat looks as big as the pyramid in this picture, but anyway, use your imagination. Here I am in Egypt. There I am. I'm the person right here on this camel, and the camel's going, oh my God. He's groaning under me because I've gained a little weight there, you know. And I'm wearing a big hat. And on that picture, it's so funny. I'll kind of walk around with this. That picture there, you can see it says, ships passing in the night. Ships passing in the night. I don't know why I wrote that, but I did. Because you see, that's where I ran into the Astors. And the Astors, just like the Carnegies and everybody else, these were my friends, for goodness sake. And I'll tell you what, that camel liked me too. I'll have to tell you. Yeah, we became kissing cousins after this trip. But I saw the pyramids and the Sphinx, and I bought some Sphinx, by golly, and I put them on my front lawn. I did. I brought some beautiful Sphinx, and I had lions. That's why it's called the House of Lions. I had lions on my front stoop there, if you will. There I'm on the camel, right here, and my daughter's next to me there. I know my back's to you. Sorry about that. So there they. Doesn't that party? Oh yeah, I love this. You know, there's no. You know what? The Sphinx has no nose. You can thank Napoleon for that because he got a cannon out there and shot the nose off of the Sphinx. Did you know that? Oh, yes, indeedy. So there I am, and there's my daughter next to me, and having a good time with the camels. They're easier to manage than a man, I'll tell you that. Oh, yes, oh, yes, oh, yes, indeed. I became quite a rider, too. You know, I could ride side saddle. Oh, boy. Yeah, I was kind of thought that was pretty wonderful. And then, you know, right after that little experience and that picture, I did something I would never do again, but I'll be honest with you. I went to a fortune teller right there in Cairo. And I don't know why I did it, I just did it. And she said, I know, I see the future for you. The future, I see much water in your future. A lot of water in your future. I thought, well, with that, I'm a good swimmer. I'm not worried about nothing. Nothing bothers me. And so I went out and I bought a little tiny talisman, a little figurine like this big, and I put it in my pocket, you know, and I remember that little talisman, put it in my pocket, and then my friends, then I got a telegram from my wonderful son, Larry, who was now married, and he had a little boy called Lawrence, or Larry also, and he says, oh, the baby is sick, Mama. Mama, can you come home? The baby is not doing well. Please, please, Mama, come home. Come home. I sent a telegram back. I said, my darling, I will be there. Mama's coming for you. Mama's coming. And I was talking to the Astors. I said, I don't know how to get home this quickly. They said, well, if you catch the Titanic, it is going to be docking on one of the ports here in France. That's the second docking it's going to do, and then that day was April the 10th. I picked up the ship that day with the Astors, no less. Yes, indeed. And they said I'm sure we can get a stateroom, and I did for $4,350. And oh my, what a ship it was, my dear friends. It was a ship like no other ship, and you have in your hands that you've been fidgeting with this whole time, the actual words that you're going to be singing very soon now, because we're going to do a sing-along, just like they did on the ship itself. Oh, yes. on the Titanic herself. And if you don't have music, maybe you can share with someone there. We'll do this together, and I'll help you out with the words. The first one is lower. Music of the day. Fly a little lower, glimmer, glimmer, shine a little lower, glimmer, glimmer, lead us this to glory wonder. The sweet voice is calling yonder, shine a little lower, glimmer, glimmer, shine a little lower, glimmer, glimmer, like the path below. And lead us on to. Now you repeat it. Shine a little lower, glimmer, glimmer, lead us to glory wonder. The sweet voice is calling yonder, shine a little lower, glimmer, glimmer, shine a little lower, glimmer, glimmer, like the path below above. And lead us on to glory. Oh, you know this next one. Oh, you big doll. Oh, it's me. I'm to sing now. Oh, okay. I'll do it. By the pot of palm, I started singing one day. Something like this. Please, for mercy should be your last song. Oh, shine on this moon up in the sky. I ain't had no lovin' since when oh, long time. So time, ain't no time to stay. Outdoors is moon, so shine on this moon, my me and my gal. Nice, one more time. Shine on this moon. I ain't had no love since when. No time, ain't no time to stay. Outdoors is moon, so shine on this moon for me and my gal. Well, that night, I danced around the home court on the arm of Mr. Astor and of Mr. Timberline. Oh, Mr. Strauss, of course, I'll save a dance for you. Everyone wanted to dance with me. Beautiful Mrs. Maggie Brown herself. There we go, around the dance floor. And they said, oh, Maggie, stay with us. We're going to play whist in just a few minutes. I said, not me, thank you. I'm going to my room and I'm going to read a book. That's what I said. Read a book. Read a book. And oh, everyone's having a wonderful time. We had a 7-course meal that night, and it was fabulous, fabulous. The ship's sailing along. We're happy, we're gay, and there we are, dancing, and I'm reading in my stateroom until all of a sudden I was thrown out of bed. Kaboom! I was thrown out of bed, and I said to myself, what is going on here? And I picked myself up, and all of a sudden I noticed that the ship's engines were no longer running, and it was a very still sound. There were 16 boilers on this ship, huge engines, huge tillers on this boat, and you could hear the hum all the time, and now they were totally silent, unlike the train next door. And so I got out of my bed, I put on my robe, and I went out to the gangway of my first class compartment, and I looked around, and I saw men looking rather frightened. I said, what has happened here? And one of the men said, we have hit an iceberg. I said, what? What are you talking about? This ship? We have 16 airtight compartments. There's nothing to be afraid of. But I thought to myself, why don't you go back to your room, put on your clothes completely before going upstairs, and put on a coat, just in case it's a little chilly tonight. And of course, grab your purse with at least $500 in it, and put on your wool hat, put on 6 pairs of stockings, just in case. But let's just go upstairs and see what truly is going on. And so I scampered upstairs, and all of a sudden I see that they are lowering the lifeboats to the Titanic. And I asked one of the crew members, I said, so, do we have to go out in the ocean tonight? He said, yes, just for a little while, until we figure out the problem. And I said, well, I'll go comfort all the women along the side of the gangways here. Don't worry, I said, gather together, ladies. They're calling for women and children. Women and children, come, let's get on the lifeboats. And of course, there weren't enough lifeboats for 2,500 people, but you know, we're only going to go out on them for just a little while. So come, ladies, it'll be fine. It'll be like rowing on the Mississippi River. And I got them all gathered up, and they started loading the boats. And then I went on the other side of the ship to comfort the other women, to calm them down. I'm very, very good in an extreme emergency. And I said, well, let's see, who else can we help here? And all of a sudden, 2 strong men picked me up and lowered me into one of the lifeboats, and I went down the side of the ship, 11 stories high it was, and I went down in the water in lifeboat number 6, and that is where all we're on lifeboat number 6, and my lifeboat isn't even filled to capacity. It would have held 65 people, and we only had half that. And all of a sudden, I could see there was a tilt to the ship, if you will. And then there was the band playing up there, playing until the very end. I remember that very clearly. And everyone on my boat, especially women and children, were crying. I said, "Don't cry. We're going to make this a party, a picnic." Well, we had the quartermaster on the boat with us that day, and he was a naysayer, if you will. And he says, "We're going to go down when the ship goes down. That ship, when it goes down, it's going to suck us down with it. That's what's going to happen." And I said, "No, don't think that way." And I started to unhook the oars of this ship. I pulled out the oars, and I got 2 or 3 women on one side and 2 or 3 on the other. And I said, "All right, now let's figure out how to do this." And then, of course, Blabbermouth, the quartermaster, was in the back doing the tiller, saying, "We're not going to make it, we're not going to make it." I said, "Shut up and till that tiller. Ladies, start rowing." And I started to sing, I started to tell stories, and to keep everyone's spirits up. And then I started to give away my clothing, my socks, my extra coat, anything that I had, because some of these people had come out in their nightgowns of all things. Thank goodness I was fully clothed. And there we are, going away from the ship. I said, "Get away from the ship as much as possible, just in case." And so we pulled away and pulled away and pulled away and pulled away, and we pulled away from the ship as much as we possibly could. And then suddenly, I started seeing the ship tilting at an angle like this. I could see the massive outline silhouetted against the starlit sky, and it was cold that night out there in the middle of the ocean. Her blackness was emphasized by row upon row of lights still burning, but only for a matter of minutes. With her attaining an angle of 60 degrees, all the lights suddenly went out, and with a roar, a huge roar, all of the gigantic boilers left their beds and went crashing through the hull, and everyone and everything in its way was destroyed. 16 boilers went crashing through the hull, and crowds of people were still on the deck and at the stern, but the end was very near. I could see that. Slowly, almost majestically, the immense stern reared itself up with propellers and rudder clear of the water, till at last she assumed an exact perpendicular. And 250 feet of it rose up into the sky till it reached a 65 or 75 degree angle. And here it seemed to pause momentarily and just hung for what felt like minutes, and gradually she turned her deck away from us as though to hide from our sight the awful spectacle of people still on her deck. Then with an everlasting, quickening glide, she slid beneath the waters of cold Atlantic, and she disappeared, and all of the people on the lifeboats held their breath, and I could hear people saying, "She's gone, she's gone. The unsinkable Titanic is gone." And I shall never forget the brave things that were done that night by crewmen, and then the men playing on the deck of the ship as it settled quietly lower and lower and lower into sea. And then the waters rose higher and higher to where they stood, and the music they played, serving alike as their own immortal requiem, and their right to be recorded on the rolls of undying fame. And there we were, all the lifeboats, seeing them go under without a murmur, without a cry. Their bravery was something I would remember until the day I died. Because that day, that horrible day, of which today is the 116th anniversary of the Titanic going down. That night of April 14th, it was nighttime when the ship hit the iceberg in 1912. In a few seconds of legendary hubris, the Unsinkable collided with the unthinkable, and the first lesson of the 20th century began. And at 2:25 the next day, the 15th of April, as it is today, the 15th, she was no more. but a memory. And she would not be found again for another 75 years. And of course, the movies that would come out, the books that would come out, everything that would come out because of this horrific thing would affect people's lives from my time until today, because everyone is fascinated by this gigantic ship that was never supposed to have sunk. And there we are in the lifeboats out there, and I tell you, I encouraged everyone. I said, hang on, we'll be rescued. They sent flares out. Surely a ship will come and rescue us. You have to have hope, and you have to have faith in God, and this is when your faith is tested. And in the distance, about 7 o'clock in the morning, I said, I think I see some lights. And of course, the quartermaster said, oh, it's just a star. I said, no, I see lights in the distance. I do. I see lights. It's a ship. It's coming. It's the Carpathia, and she's going to rescue us. And she did. She rescued a single lifeboat and every single person in those lifeboats. And we are going to be the last lifeboat to get up onto the deck of the Carpathia. And whoa, I will never forget that as long as I live. The thousands of people on that ship waiting to have some comfort, to have food, people realizing, especially the third-class women who lost their husbands, their brothers, their fathers, they were alone now. I said, you know, it's better to have died on the ship as a woman than to have lost your husband. That's what I said, because these people had a life ahead of them of some of the misery unless I did something about it. So I went to each person and I said, parlez-vous le français? Ah, mais oui. And I'd say, sprechen Sie Deutsch? What is your name? What is your number? Where did you come from? Did you have a husband? Did you have a brother? Where are you going? Do you know anyone in the United States? I see, and I took every name of the 702 survivors. 1,500 went down with the ship. I took all of their names, and we started a commissary or an infirmary right there in the dining room, and Captain Rostrom was right beside me. He was the one who took it seriously when we said we struck an iceberg, we're in trouble, SOS. It was the first SOS in recorded history. And the California was very close. That ship was very close. They ignored it. They saw our flares. They ignored it. Oh, they're having a party. Not a party. We were desperately fighting for our lives. But the Carpathia came, rescued us, and so Captain Rostrom and I were there helping all the people, all the children. And because I could speak languages, I could communicate almost with everyone. Every language I could speak. Buonasera. What is your language? Well, for 4 days and 4 nights, I did not sleep a wink because I needed to take care of my little orphan children and the women. And I started passing the hat around, and I said, put as much in there as you possibly can. We need to help these people that have nothing and have lost everything. And so we passed the hat around, and we raised $10,000 before we got to New York City. And we sent telegrams to New York City and said who was on the ship, who wasn't on the ship. And everyone wondered, well, did the Guggenheims make it? No, they did not. Did the Strausses make it? No, they did not. They both, husband and wife, went down together. They said, why should we be parted now? We've been together 50 years, let's go together. I'll never forget that. And Mr. Astor, he went down with the ship, and he left his beautiful bride, Madeline, who was pregnant. And so I made sure that there was a special boat to come out to help her because she almost had the baby on the boat. And so she was rescued, and then we finally docked, and when the newspaper men and women rushed the ship, they said, Mrs. Brown, what's going on? Tell us. I'm too busy now, I'll talk to you later. And that's very unusual for me. Very unusual. Mrs. Brown, one question. Why did you not go down with the ship? And I said, because I believe in the great brown luck. We are unsinkable. That's what I said. And that's where the title came from for the musical and the movie, The Unsinkable, Molly Brown. But I had still so much to do. here we are, getting all these people off the boat and making sure that they have safe headquarters and safe homes and safe places to be. And I raised another $15,000 for them. And I said, I'm not leaving New York until I know that everyone has a place to sleep. Everyone has a bed, and everyone is going to have some food in their stomach. I'm not leaving these people no matter what. That's what I'm not going to do. And so that's what I did. But I know I heard this. Mr. J.J. Brown found out that I had survived. He said, oh, damn it, I thought she'd gone down for life. Never cease thanking him. This nightmare has awakened in me a better manhood. And all my life will be spent in showing his gratefulness to his Creator. And you know, he did. He was a doer. That man was a doer. He was somebody else. I was so proud of my son and my daughter too. But when I got back to Denver, ladies and gentlemen, when I got back to Denver, who you think greeted me there in Denver when I went to the Brown House Hotel? Sacred 36. Oh, Mrs. Brown. Mrs. Brown. Is that you? Oh, they knew it was me. Mrs. Brown, do have a luncheon in your honor at Mrs. Crawford Hill's house. Had a special delivery letter to that effect. So I went to Mrs. Crawford Hill's house for the first time in my life, and I always thought to myself, well, I guess I made it. I'm in the Sacred 36 company, and for 3 hours I regaled them about stories about the sinking of the Titanic. And of course, by that point, all the papers are calling me a heroine of the Titanic. I said, oh, you would have done the same thing. If there's a problem, you got to fix it. Something needs to be done, you just do something. And you know, there was just a small window of time for me to do something for other people, and I wanted to do it big. So after that sinking of the Titanic, I said to myself, I'm going to go to Congress, and I'm going to tell them that every boat needs to have enough lifeboats. That was something they didn't have back then. And every person needs to have a instruction on how to get the lifeboats down. They didn't even know how to get the lifeboats down. Half of them fell into the water and the people spilled out on them. It was amazing. So I stood before Congress and I said, plus, I'm going to tell you right now, I don't believe in just women and children first. Everybody needs to be rescued on a ship. And so, my friends, that's why you have your own life jacket and lifeboat every time you go on a Princess Cruise or a Disney cruise. That's why. That was changing maritime laws. That's what it was all about. And then I said, well, you know, I still can do some more good in this world. I worked for suffragettes' rights. Women did not have the right to vote. I'm going to be a suffragette full time now, and we're going to get the right to vote. And when, ladies, did we get the right to vote? What year? 1920 for most of the country. Colorado got it a little earlier, but I've always said if you don't vote, that's a shame, because there were women who wanted to vote for a couple hundred years in this country and never got a chance. So vote. Everybody should get out there and vote. And then, of course, I ran for the Senate and the representatives of my state starting in 1914. I was so happy to do that. I didn't win, but I ran. Maybe it's just as well I didn't win. I think it was Mark Twain that said, suppose you were an idiot, and suppose you were a member of Congress. Oh, but I repeat myself. So I ran for Congress, and then I believed in rights for children. Children shouldn't be working in factories. And when the Ludlow mine massacre happened just in southern Colorado in 1914, I went up there before the whole tragedy happened of losing a lot of lives, and I provided for the men and the women and the children there, and there was my husband. Working with the mine in the high hickety-poos there. We were on opposite sides of the fence here. I believe that those men needed shorter working days, more money, insurance to take care of their loved ones when they were in trouble. That's the kind of thing I did. I worked with delinquent children in Denver. Those are the kinds of things I did. And then I said, well, I guess it's time to go back to Europe. And it was right toward the end of World War I that I went back to Europe, and I was given the Legion of Honor Medal for helping blind soldiers to read Braille. I learned to read Braille too. And I helped those French soldiers, and they gave me this wonderful honor. And then I said, I'm going to entertain these men. And I did the entertainment about plays that Sarah Bernhardt used to do. And I tell you, they loved me. They thought I was amazing. And so I'm entertaining the troops. I get my Legion of Honor medallion. Of course, there's one woman who thought I just got it at a hawk shop. Don't read this book. I didn't get it at a hawk shop. No, sirree, it's a real thing. And this is the book you should read, Unraveling the Myth. You'll find out about my acting days. Oh, I used to love to act there in my Newport, Rhode Island house. My dining room would have a big table with a big fish pond in the middle of it. You could watch the goldfish while you're eating. Isn't that a wonderful idea? I love that. And in the corner, there was a little place, a little stage for me where I would recite or act a special part out for everybody. And then, of course, when the war started, I told everyone, I said, well, I let the government know. I went to Calvin Coolidge himself. I said, wait. I want you to use my house in Newport as a hospital. It's a big cottage, huge house. And I said, use it as a hospital for the World War I men coming back, and I'll be a nurse. And they said, no, ma'am, we have real nurses. I said, all right, I'll entertain the troops. And that's what I would do. So those are the kinds of stories you'll read about in here. And strangely enough, this woman, Kristen Iverson, who took the time to really research the real story about my life, she went to a reception when this book came out, and she happened to meet my grandson, great-grandson, and his name was Larry Brown. And you know that today they are married. They got married. Kristen Iverson, who spent 8 to 10 years researching and writing that book about my life, she married my great-grandson. I think I got goosebumps over that one. I think that's oh my goodness. Well, my friends, before I leave you today, I just know, I can feel in the room those questions and thoughts that you might be having about things that I did say or didn't say. I just have a funny feeling before I leave you with one last song that you might want to ask me something. So what is it? I don't care. Nothing embarrasses me. Nothing at all. Nothing at all. Yes, sir.
The Brown Palace Hotel.
I owned it. That's what I told everybody. Well, I didn't own it. That was actually Johnny Brown. Johnny Brown built that hotel, but I stayed there every time I went to Denver. And I did rent out my house at 1340 Pennsylvania Avenue. But I stayed there, and if you go in one of the rooms, you'll see my signature on the wall that they preserved. But I had a beautiful suite there, and always stayed there at the Brown Palace when my house was being rented, and I was traveling the world or doing all of my charitable things. That's what I did. Other questions? Yes, sir, right back there, with a good-looking cowboy hat and beard. Yes, sir.
How you say, speaking of the Titanic, it has 2 sisters, Louisiana
Yes.
and Britannica.
That's true.
And they, all 3 of them have something in common, sadly and regrettably.
Yes.
They all sank.
They all sank, and the problem was in the riveting of the ship. They finally figured it out what it was. And you know, years later, when they picked up the ship and they started finding it, 75 years later, and by golly, you know, when we left the side of the Titanic, we said prayers and we threw flowers onto the gravesite, because that was the gravesite for most of those people. But you know, most of the bodies that were floating in the water were collected and taken in the hull of the Carpathia, and later on they were buried over in Nova Scotia. There's a huge memorial over there and a cemetery, and we don't know the names of most of those people. But they are all buried there, and they have little headstones, and some of the headstones have no names because we don't know who they are. And about 1920, I went with all of my 3 adopted girls, and my son Larry went with me, and we made a wreath for 300 graves over there to give our respects to them, you see. And also, we put a big statue up to the survivors. Well, I shouldn't say the survivors of the Titanic. It'd be for the men that didn't make it and made sure that we made it. And that beautiful statue, I wrote this, To the brave men who perished in the wreck of the Titanic, April 15th, 1912. They gave their lives that women and children might be saved. And you know, sadly enough, there's a vigorous feminist debate about that. They didn't think that I should have done that. I said, look, those men saved our lives. And that statue is in the southwestern corner of the Potomac River there in Washington, D.C. And Mrs. Taft helped me to dedicate that particular statue there for them. Yes. I want to bring someone to your attention here today. Speaking of people helping other people and doing for other people, I know each and every one of you has a story that you can tell. But there's a little lady here, and I think her name is Pearl. Is that you? Is that you? Would you come up here? Come on up here, Pearl. Pearl, I understand, has a wonderful thing that she does. She goes home, she cuts out coupons from the newspapers and from magazines, and she sends them to our troops. And do you know how much money this lady's accumulated by doing that? Over $1 million for our troops. I said no, $1.9 million she has raised for our boys out there. And if it wasn't for those military men, we would not be sitting here today with the freedom that we have to do this fun stuff that we're doing tonight. And she's a World War II veteran. Woo-hoo! She's almost 94. Well, I'm older than that. Yeah, I was born in 1867, right after the Civil War. Oh, and I tell you what, I honored my friend Mark Twain. I had a statue to Huckleberry Finn and Tom Sawyer put up right there in Hannibal, Missouri. I did for my dear friend, Mr. Mark Twain. If he hadn't encouraged me that day as I was trying to wait on him at the Park Hotel restaurant, I would have never gotten to Colorado. I never would have had the life I had. Yes, ma'am.
How and when did you die?
Well, you know, they say that I passed away at the age of 65, rather young, I think, at the Barbizon Hotel there in New York City. I had a suite of rooms there. I had my nurse there. Now, you know, I'm talking real lighthearted about the Titanic and whatever. I went through other things, too, like the Breakers fire in Miami. I saved a bunch of people there when the fire was going on. I got them all to safety. I had these strenuous experiences in my life, don't you know? And that Titanic, I had nightmares about it night after night after night until the day I died. So it did affect my health. I'm going to tell you that right now. But I did pass away there in New York City. And of course, J.J. Brown and I, we've been separated since about 1909, but I still married to him. Because I'm Catholic, I don't believe in divorce. And so there you have that side of the story. And he kept up his mining interests and so forth, and he passed away at Helen's house in New York City. And right after I died, woohoo! I wake up and guess who's sitting next to me? J.J. Brown. We're buried at the Wood Cemetery there on Long Island. Go ahead. So we're united in death. If we weren't united all the time in life. I never loved another man, although I have to tell you, the Duke of Chartres wanted to marry me, and he had a title. Now, believe it or not, my sister Helen actually married a man with a title, and she became a baroness. Go figure. So I thought, well, yeah, that'd be nice to have a little title. And so all the Parisian papers said, oh, Miss Brown is going to marry the Duke of Chartres. Well, I was still married to JJ. But at any rate, I found out the next day that his title was extinct. So with an extinct title, I wrote back to him, no, I love you too, but I'm not going to go that far with you. Not without a title. Yes, in the back, please.
Yes, and how was life in the 1800s? I know my ancestors lived around that time period, but I never understood how life in the 1800s is.
I do too. You know, the time that I grew up as a child was an innocent, naive, wonderful time. And before taxation began in the this country. We had a lot more freedom and made a lot more money. I think the politicians got happy with us and started taxing everybody too much, but things were a lot simpler, and when you made your buck, you could hang on to your buck. That's what I liked about it. Things were wonderful back then, no doubt about it. When the Titanic went down, things truly changed, because after that we have World War I, World War II, etc. This lady here has a question.
Tell us how much was taken out of that mine that your husband owned?
Oh my goodness, I cannot tell you, but it was billions taken out of the little Johnny mine. And that's why I had the money to support this habit I have of meeting people like you, sharing a good time, and having love spread out everywhere I go. You know, I used to walk by the men's club in Denver, and I used to wear my furs. Yeah, so I didn't have furs. And I walked by the windows and I'd strut, you know, with my walking cane. And they would say, well, there goes that fur-bearing animal herself, Mrs. Bonner Brown. But I just kept on, just keep your head high no matter what. Are there other questions here today before I end? Yes?
Did you go to theatrical school to learn?
I studied under the tutor of Sarah Bernhardt. I surely did. That's not a fake story. That's a true story. Yes, I did. I studied under her tutor, and they said, and I spoke in French to the Frenchmen, of course, because je parle français, yeah, pretty well. I had 2 French maids. I spoke to French to them all the time at my house. I sound kind of rough and ready, but I'll tell you what, I can speak those languages. And I love pretty things in life. And boy, you're a pretty sight today. And I'm going to end with a song just for you, if I may. And if you have other questions at all after this little fun time that we're having today, you come on up and ask me anything you want.
Are you a ghost?
What's your name, honey? I love that question. No one's ever asked me that. She says, are you a ghost? And she said, well, you're older than that lady. How can that be? Are you a ghost? What is your name?
Virginia Wayne.
Virginia Wayne, you are a beautiful, wonderful woman, but you're naive as hell. Isn't she beautiful? You know, that's what we need.
I'm older than you anyway.
Yeah. Really? 200 years?
I'm 96 years old.
Whoa! Well, I'll tell you, that's pretty darn good. She beat you. Well, the wonderful thing about that movie, other than the necklace that came, and someone gave me this beautiful necklace off the ship. I'm sure you remember this necklace in the Titanic story.
The heart of the ocean.
That's right, the heart of the ocean. She's right here. And I have Molly Brown, done by Debbie Reynolds, who was a very good friend of VanAnn Moore, very lovely lady, and I'm so sorry she's not with us anymore. Tammy Grimes played the first show on Broadway about my life. Of course, my daughter didn't want anything to do with me or the legend or anything else. She just said, no, I don't want to hear anything like that. But she saw the musical happen, and then, of course, soon after that, the movie. So, but my son Larry was always behind me, 150%. He really, really was. So I'm glad today there are books about me. I'm glad that there's another Titanic movie. And if you have children, there's some of us that are young at heart here, there's a sweet little book, The Heroine of the Titanic, and I was going to read this to you in the beginning. I'll begin this, and then I'll end with a song, and all my love will go with this song for you. Molly Brown, you asking for Molly Brown, born in Hannibal, Missouri, on the poorer side of town. She grew up and went to Leadville and married J. Brown, and when the ship Titanic sank, Molly did not go down. That's what you remember. And that's what you need to remember. God will hold your hand no matter what you go through, even when you're dying, he will give you dying grace. Because Jesus Christ is the one that I believe in, and he has given me eternal life. I'm still alive. Every night in ground. And